Hi everybody. So today what we're going to talk about is a very important subject because this goes into the deep essence of what it means to be dealing with the crisis in the church. And the thing is that to really understand how we feel being in the modern Catholic Church, I think it's going to be helpful for me to share my journey from being what we might call a radical traditionalist to being what I'm in a funny way call a tradical. And you'll very much get a sense of what that means as I speak. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about the way in which there are challenges. There are things that maybe you might be dealing with as somebody who is struggling to understand something about the church. And there's really two things. A lot of times folks can really struggle with two major church crises, which are the abuse scandals, and I'd say the doctrinal or ideological confusions, the disorientation of our times. And these are the two big things that people can really be dealing with that are very problematic. And so this is the things that people can really be bothered by these things, and they're serious things to consider on both accounts. Today we're really going to be focusing on the side of this which is more in terms of the doctrinal confusion. Because let me tell you, when I was in this sense of being a radical traditionalist, and it's maybe helpful to realize the reason why I became a radical traditionalist, or what you might call a radical traditionalist, or even just a traditionalist in general. And I want to make very, very clear that I still view myself as a supporter of tradition. So before we get into any debates about that type of thing, I want you to know that, like, if you're a traditional Catholic, I'm on your side. I want traditional people. There's so much that the world needs to be infused with the spirit of Catholic tradition. There's so much. Society is collapsing. There's so many beautiful things that are rooted in Catholic tradition. And the culture that surrounds Catholic tradition, I think there's so much that we can learn. And the thing that I really want to talk about, it's not that I am saying that I don't want to be a traditionalist. I'm saying that the traditionalism has a vocation, that we have an offensive mission, that we have, and we have an offensive mission of love. And that's what I'm trying to say in this video. I'm not trying to say, I don't like traditionalists. Traditionalists, I want to be friends with traditionalists. I want traditionalists around. I consider myself somewhat a traditionalist. I want all that is in tradition. That is certainly true. The thing that I don't want to do is I don't want tradition to fail to do I want us to do what I believe may be our job in the modern church. That's what I'm going to be talking about. But the thing is that tradition, what I'm talking about here is that when we're in the modern church, there's a lot of pain in being a traditionalist. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of ways of feeling deeply uncomfortable with the modern church. And I want to explain some of these things, and I can see this, a lot of people who I know, especially, strong Catholic men, who are traditionalists. You could see this pattern, online, or even, just like it can be exhausting. Just even in our own lives, it can be exhausting because these men are really trying to stand up for their families, and they're trying to really, embody the Catholic tradition. But the thing is that it's exhausting to just kind of keep up with the news about the church or the latest problem in the church, or it's just kind of one problem after another, and it can be very frustrating. And then people can feel that they're judging people, and they're like falling into even despair about and then there's all different ways in which we can fall into despair about how is the church. We can worry about getting into worrying about the hierarchy. And there can be all these different problems. And so the thing really is that there's so many different ways that this can become a deeply disturbing thing for people. But what I want to really emphasize in this video is that what happened to me about a year or so ago gave me a new perspective that helped me to see the church in a new way and helped resolve a lot of this tension. And this is going to be my testimony about how I experienced this shift. And the interesting thing is I don't really know what did this per se. I don't exactly know what was the exact thing that set it off. Um, but I want to share with you what this was, and because I think this is going to be very helpful to giving us a sense of maybe, okay, well, what's going on in the church, and what are we going to do about it practically? Because it's frustrating, you know, it's frustrating to see that, like, okay, that there may be, like, it may seem like, okay, there's only a few bishops who seem to be really fighting for tradition, and it's frustrating to just be like, wow, wow, look at the church, like, it's full of all these different ideologies, and it was very discouraging. I come from a background of being involved in the New Age movement. I'm definitely, these are things that are outside the scope of the Catholic tradition. And so when I came into the church and returned to my faith, I saw all these different ideologies, whether it was, one thing or another, like whether it was the Eastern meditations, whether it was, the spirituality of the Pentecostal movement, whether it was all these different things that were from outside the church, or outside the tradition of the church, were being brought into the church. And I was saying, no, we don't want these things. Why? We have the right way of doing things. Why are all these things being let in? And then there's many things. When people are, when you kind of think about things like a traditionalist, it becomes deeply disturbing to go to a normal mass. Like, it becomes so disturbing and distressing. And I think the other thing is that we can't even, if we don't get a perspective on how all this can fit together, we can barely even admit how uncomfortable we are in the modern church. Because when we're in that traditionalist mindset, we see all we see is irreverence, And the thing is that it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that there doesn't need to be a million times more reverence for the Eucharist. It doesn't mean that. But the thing is, what happens is our lens gets a little bit messed up, and we start to be so agitated by everything we see. We start to get very agitated by everything that's happening at a normal Catholic Mass in the Novus Ordo liturgy. We start to get so agitated by these things that we can barely be there. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be disturbed about anything where there's some actual irreverence. It doesn't mean that we should. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I love communion in the hand, for example. It doesn't mean that I think that's a great idea. I think it should. I receive on the tongue. In fact, if you're a traditionalist, I receive kneeling on the tongue. It's like I don't think that that's a great idea. But the thing is that but there's many elements where every little bit we start to kind of every little bit of the liturgy, the culture, everything is pinging at us if we enter into that the traditionalist sensibility in a certain way. And it starts to just agitate us and bring us down. We look at the modern churches, and we look at the architecture, and we say, "Wow, this church it doesn't look good. Like, why does it look like this? Why does the art look like this? Why does the stained glass window look like this? Like, why is it this modern art thing?" It's so discouraging when we're in that mindset. Now, it really is, and it's so deeply discouraging because and the frustrations. I'm not going to go into this in depth because it's not what I want to feed into. But you can see how much frustration we have. When we're in a traditionalist mindset, there's a lot of frustration with the Pope. There's all these different things, but these frustration with the hierarchy. There's a lot of pain, and so I just want to emphasize that this is a difficult thing to be in that mindset. And I really, eventually underwent this shift that, allowed me to kind of change my view on these things. And I hope that, ultimately what I found was in the shift that happened to me was this ability to look at the church like a family. And when I was able to see the way forward, when I was able to see, okay, like this is the way that maybe the things are supposed to be integrated, or this is the way the ideologies should be brought into the church, and this is the way they shouldn't be. It let me see all these different factions and all these different ideologies and all these different things, and even aspects of the Novus Ordo liturgy. It let me, it changed the way I looked at things, and it freed me from this deep sense that I didn't even know that I had of how deeply uncomfortable I was in the modern church. And so that's why I'm sharing this little series here of videos to describe my journey from being this kind of radical traditionalist to a tradical, where I went from saying, okay, the vocation of tradition is to keep out all these other ideologies, to thinking that to having a sense that the vocation of tradition is to redeem these ideologies, is to go out and to be so deeply alive and vital for the process of redeeming other forms of thought. And so we're going to go into that in these next few videos to really explain this process and to go more deeply into this shift.